Ministers are expected to discuss the next Brexit steps at a mini cabinet meeting later today. On the agenda will be a key sticking point in the negotiations with Brussels. How much should we pay to settle our debts with the EU and to unlock the stalled talks? Let's talk now to two guests. Nina Schick, who is a political advisor and commentator from Germany, and to Brexit supporting founder of Wetherspoon's Pubs, Tim Martin. Hello, both of you. Thank you very much for coming on the programme. I'm going to start with you, Tim Martin, if I may. Are you surprised that our list of liabilities, what we owe, isn't a matter of fact, but seems to be at the moment more a matter of opinion?
Yes, I understand that the legal position from the government is that we are under no obligation to pay anything. So it's one of those situations where in a divorce you don't have to pay anything, but you might do so to be nice.
I mean, you clearly believe that legal opinion, but it doesn't make sense, does it? We've signed off what we owe them as a member, and now that we're removing ourselves, we need to settle up with our liabilities.
Well, all the public knows is the legal advice that the government has had, and the legal advice, which hasn't been contradicted so far as I'm aware, is that we are under no legal obligation to pay anything. We might decide to do so anyway if we feel there's some sort of moral obligation, but that's a different matter, really.
Okay. You spend a lot of time talking to figures in Brussels. What do the Europeans think about this sticking point over the bill?
Well, it's quite clear for them this is really a legal issue. Will the UK honour its commitments or not? And we won't see any progress in the talks. The next kind of crunch point is in December, unless the UK decides to move. And despite the legal advice that Mr. Martin just quoted, I mean, realistically, the government has conceded that it will have to pay. So it's not actually contesting the principle that it will have to pay something. The only thing that is contesting at this moment is how big that figure should be. Of course, Theresa May has already made a suggestion of 20 billion, and the EU said, well, that actually doesn't cover your financial liabilities. So the kind of meeting, the Brexit cabinet meeting today, we think they're going to up the offer to 40 billion to see if that moves talks forward. So this idea that the UK is actually not going to pay anything is certainly not the government's position, and it's not the position of Brexit supporting cabinet ministers either.
Are you surprised that there isn't a list of what Britain is supposed to pay up because of what we've said we will pay as a member?
There is a list, and the Commission has, of course, revealed what it contests in the Brexit bill. And the UK is obviously going through it line by line and trying to diminish the sum, the overall sum. And I think the realization is that the real issue here is not the question of whether or not the UK will pay, because even though these sums sound extraordinarily large, 60 billion, 100 billion, in the grand scheme of things, it's not that much for the government to pay, because if there is no deal, the government would have a much bigger financial hit than the 60 billion, 20 billion, 40 billion. It's much more to do with domestic optics, because, of course, during the campaign, nobody said there'd be a thing as a Brexit bill, or indeed that would be having to pay the EU to leave. So this is a question of how can you portray this at home without incensing the public, really.
Tim Martin, you're a successful businessman, negotiated lots of times and successfully lots of times. What would you advise to get the talks going?
I'd say that we are under no legal obligation to pay any money, in spite of what you've just heard. It didn't amount to a legal obligation. It's horse trading by the EU. I'd say we're perfectly happy to trade on World Trade Organization rules. Contrary to the spin, that will reduce food prices. We will immediately save £200 million per week. So the public knows, unlike the comments from your guest now, that that's one heck of a lot of money. So I would say we want to be friends with Europe. We want to trade with Europe. We're not going to pay huge sums of money, and we're quite happy to trade on World Trade Organization rules, as we do with America, with China, with India, etc.
OK. Leave it there. Thank you. Thank you very much, both of you.